18 years ago today, we witnessed one of those bittersweet moments that really show how brutal Formula One can be, even to the most beloved teams. On January 24th, 2005, Eddie Jordan, the charismatic Irishman who gave Michael Schumacher his F1 debut, finally had to let go of his dream. After 14 years of punching above their weight, Jordan Grand Prix was sold to the Midland Group. Jordan wasn't just another team, they were the underdogs everyone rooted for. Think about it. This was the squad that had Schumacher's first race, Damon Hill's incredible victory at Spa in '98, and who could forget Heinz-Harald Frentzen nearly challenging for the title in '99. They proved you didn't need endless millions to create magical F1 moments. Let me set the stage for you. Jordan Grand Prix wasn't your typical Formula One team. When they burst onto the scene in 1991, they brought this incredible underdog energy that was infectious. Picture this scrappy Irish outfit, led by the larger-than-life Eddie Jordan, going toe-to-toe with manufacturers who had budgets bigger than some small countries. These guys had an uncanny ability to spot talent like nobody else. I mean, who gave Michael Schumacher his first F1 drive? Jordan, who took a chance on Rubens Barrichello when he was just a fresh-faced kid. Jordan again. They were like F1's talent scouts, always finding diamonds in the rough before the big teams swooped in with their checkbooks. But what really made Jordan special was how they operated. While other teams were building massive corporate empires, Jordan kept that family feel. Eddie ran that team like your local pub. Everyone knew everyone, and there was always room for a bit of crack. They'd show up with those bright yellow cars and the buzzing Hornet logo, and somehow manage to embarrass teams with 10 times their budget. Remember that magical 1999 season? Heinz-Harald Frentzen, a driver Ferrari had written off, suddenly found himself fighting for the world championship in a Jordan. They weren't just making up the numbers, they were genuine contenders. That win at Spa? Pure Jordan magic. Racing in the wet against all odds, showing that sometimes heart and hustle can trump raw horsepower and deep pockets. But here's the thing about being the plucky underdog. It gets harder and harder to keep punching above your weight as the sport evolves. By the early 2000s, Formula One was changing. It wasn't just about having the fastest car anymore, it was about having the biggest research facility, the most advanced simulators, hundreds of engineers. The kind of stuff that makes independent teams break out in a cold sweat when they look at the invoice. So here's where things really hit the fan. January 24th, 2005. Eddie Jordan walks into his office, probably with that trademark grin of his slightly dimmed, and signs the papers that would end his team's incredible 14-year run in Formula One. The Midland Group, led by Canadian businessman Alex Schneider, takes over what many considered the last true independent team. The writing had been on the wall for a while, to be honest. The team had been struggling to keep up with the escalating costs of competing at the highest level. We're talking about a sport where even the smallest upgrades could cost millions, and the big manufacturers were throwing around the kind of money that would make your eyes water. Jordan, running on a fraction of their budget, was trying to keep up with Ferrari and McLaren. It was like bringing a knife to a nuclear war. The sale wasn't just about money, though. It represented a fundamental shift in Formula One's DNA. The days when you could start a team from scratch, run it with passion and ingenuity, and occasionally stick it to the big boys. Those days were disappearing faster than a set of soft tires on a hot day. The sport was becoming a playground for major manufacturers and billionaire investors. You know what's really ironic? Jordan had just signed a promising young driver named Tiago Monteiro for that 2005 season. The poor guy shows up thinking he's joining Jordan, only to find himself driving for Midland before he's even turned a wheel in anger. That's F1 for you. One day you're the plucky Irish underdog, the next you're part of a Russian-Canadian business empire. The team's final race under Jordan ownership had been the 2004 Brazilian Grand Prix. They finished that season 9th in the Constructors' Championship, a far cry from their glory days of the late 90s. But even then, they went out fighting, typical Jordan style, squeezing every last tenth out of what they had. The financial demands of Formula One were becoming brutal by 2005, and Jordan's situation really highlighted just how much the sport had changed. While the big manufacturer teams were throwing around hundreds of millions like it was pocket change, private teams like Jordan were scraping by on what amounted to loose change in F1 terms. Think about this. In the late 90s, you could run a competitive F1 team on about 50 million dollars a year. By 2005, the top teams were spending north of $400 million. Jordan was trying to compete with maybe a quarter of that. It's like bringing a slingshot to an artillery battle and hoping for the best. What made it even more painful was watching the sport transform around them. Ferrari had Fiat's billions, McLaren had Mercedes backing, Williams had BMW. Everywhere you looked, the manufacturers were taking over. The days when an independent team could innovate their way to success were vanishing. You couldn't just come up with a clever design anymore. You needed wind tunnels, supercomputers, and an army of engineers to stay competitive. Eddie Jordan tried everything to keep the team independent. He brought in sponsors, made deals, even considered partnerships with other struggling teams. But in F1, being clever and resourceful only gets you so far when your competitors can outspend you 10 to 1. The sale to Midland wasn't just about one team's fate. It was a sign that Formula One had changed fundamentally. The era of the privateer, the romantic notion of the small team making it big through pure racing spirit, was coming to an end. You know what's really telling? Within a few years of Jordan's sale, other independent teams like Minardi would follow suit. The sport was becoming a two-tier system, those with manufacturer backing and those just trying to survive. It was the end of an era where passion and ingenuity could sometimes trump pure financial muscle. The team's journey after Jordan's sale reads like a game of musical chairs in the F1 paddock. First up was Midland, who lasted about as long as a set of soft tires in a race. They barely made it through 2006 before selling to Spyker. Yeah, that's Spyker, the Dutch sports car manufacturer who thought they could crack F1. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. Then came the Force India years, and that's where things got interesting. Vijay Mallya swooped in, brought some stability, and the team actually started showing flashes of that old Jordan magic again. They weren't winning championships, but they were back to doing what Jordan did best, punching above their weight, scoring podiums when nobody expected them to. Fast forward to today, and that scrappy little team Eddie started is now racing as Aston Martin, with Fernando Alonso at the wheel and Lawrence Stroll's billions in the bank. Talk about a glow-up. They're fighting at the front of the grid again, just with a different shade of green instead of that iconic yellow. As for Eddie Jordan himself, he did what Eddie does best, reinvented himself. Became one of the most entertaining F1 pundits you'll ever hear, speaking his mind and stirring up trouble in the paddock, just like the old days. Plus, he made a pretty penny in various business ventures. Turns out he was as sharp in the boardroom as he was in the pit lane. But you know what's really wild? That original Jordan spirit never really died. Through all those transformations, that DNA of the underdog, fighting against the odds, somehow survived. Even now, as Aston Martin, they still love nothing more than showing up the big boys, just like they did back in the Jordan days. Different name, different color, same fighting spirit. You know, the sale of Jordan Grand Prix wasn't just another team changing hands. It was really the end of an era in Formula One. It showed just how brutal the financial pressures in modern F1 had become. When even a beloved team like Jordan, who'd given us some of the sport's most magical moments, couldn't make it work anymore, you knew things had fundamentally changed. It marked this massive shift in how F1 operated. Gone were the days when a charismatic dreamer like Eddie Jordan could start from nothing and build a competitive team through pure passion and clever thinking. The sport was becoming a playground for manufacturers and billionaires. Think less plucky underdog and more corporate powerhouse. But perhaps most importantly, it highlighted an uncomfortable truth about top-level motorsport. Success isn't just about talent and innovation anymore. Jordan had this incredible knack for spotting future champions, coming up with creative solutions, and occasionally embarrassing teams with 10 times their budget. But in the end, all that ingenuity couldn't compete with raw financial muscle. The really fascinating part is how this sale ended up being a preview of F1's future. Within a few years, pretty much every independent team either sold up or disappeared. The sport transformed into this two-tier system. You were either backed by serious corporate money, or you were basically making up the numbers. That Jordan sale? It wasn't just the end of one team's independent journey. It was the canary in the coal mine for Formula One's entire business model. When you look at F1 today, with its budget caps and discussions about financial sustainability, you can trace a lot of it back to what happened with Jordan. Their story showed everyone that passion alone wasn't enough anymore. The sport needed to find a way to keep the playing field somewhat level, or risk losing what made F1 special in the first place. You know what's really remarkable about Jordan's legacy? Even though the team's gone through more makeovers than a Formula One car during development season, that original spirit never really died. From those bright yellow cars to today's racing green Aston Martins, there's still this undeniable thread of innovation and fighting spirit that connects them all. Sure, the world of Formula One has changed dramatically since Eddie Jordan first rolled his cars onto the grid. The sport's become more polished, more corporate, more, well, expensive. But if you look closely at Aston Martin today, you can still see flashes of that old Jordan DNA, that willingness to take risks, to think differently, to occasionally throw the rulebook out the window and try something new. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Nothing in Formula One truly ends. It just transforms. Jordan Grand Prix might have sold up in 2005, but their legacy lives on in every underdog team that manages to snag an unlikely podium, in every innovative design that makes the big teams scratch their heads, and in every young driver who gets their breakthrough chance with a midfield team. And isn't that what makes Formula One so special? It's not just about the cars or the technology, it's about the stories, the evolution, and the spirit that gets passed down through generations. Jordan might be gone from the entry list, but their impact on the sport? That's still very much alive and racing. Thanks for joining me on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed this video and want more daily F1 content, until next time.